You have been in that room. Everyone had agreed on something that was not true. Heads nodded. The coffee kept moving. The moment passed. You felt it in your chest before your mind caught up. A small refusal. A weight that would not shift. Maybe you said nothing that day. Maybe you said one sentence, and the temperature in the room changed. Either way, you knew. Something in you does not bend. It has never bent, not once, when it actually counted. You have paid for that. A job that quietly ended. A friendship that cooled without explanation. A seat at a family table where your name is now spoken in a careful tone. There are words for women who do this. Difficult. Too intense. Sharp. Unable to let anything go. You have used those words on yourself. Late at night, when the cost is still fresh, you wonder whether they are right. And yet you would do it again. That is the part nobody understands, including you. Because it never felt like bravery in the moment. It felt like there was no other choice available, as though the option everyone else took had simply been taken off the table for you. 25 centuries ago, a playwright watched a young woman do exactly this. She lost everything she had for one act of loyalty. Her name has been argued over ever since by people who cannot decide what she was. A heroine, a fanatic, a saint, a girl who refused to be reasonable. Carl Jung would have recognized her at once. Not as a character in a play, as a pattern that lives inside certain women and quietly shapes their entire lives. And the strangest part of that pattern is what it does with suffering. The women who carry it get cast out, punished, misread by almost everyone who meets them. Then they come back into the room holding a clarity that nobody else there has. Not warmth, not charm. Something harder to look at and impossible to purchase. The reason for that goes much deeper than personality. It has to do with which law you have actually been obeying all this time, because there are two of them, and almost nobody is told this. The word they reach for first is difficult. It arrives early, usually in childhood, and it never really leaves. Difficult is a strange accusation when you look at it closely. It is almost never applied to what you did. It is applied to how much trouble your honesty caused other people. A woman who lies smoothly is not called difficult. A woman who names the lie is. So the word is not a description of your character. It is a report on the friction you created inside a group that had already made its decision. Once you see this, something loosens. You have been carrying a label that was never about you at all. The old Greeks had a more precise vocabulary for this. They spoke of two kinds of order. There was the decree, issued by whoever held power that season. And there was the older order, unwritten, which no ruler had issued and no ruler could revoke. Sophocles built a whole play on the collision between them. A city had just survived a civil war. Two brothers had killed each other on the field. The new ruler honored one body with full rights and left the other in the dirt as a warning. Anyone who touched that second body would die. The decree was public, legal, and popular. The city agreed because the city was tired and frightened. One person did not agree. His name was not spoken by the crowd. Hers was Antigone, and the unburied brother was her own. You already know what she did. What matters is why she could not do anything else. She did not argue that the decree was inconvenient. She said something far more dangerous. She said the decree had no authority over the thing it was trying to govern. That distinction is not stubbornness. It is a claim about reality. And it is exactly the claim your body has been making, silently, at every table where you could not go along. The struggle you have been living is not a flaw in your temperament. It is a structural conflict, and it has a shape. Two laws live in you, and they do not speak the same language. The first is the law of the group. It is made of rules that are agreed upon, revised, and enforced by the people around you. It tells you what is acceptable this year, in this family, in this profession, in this town. This law is not evil. It is how any group holds itself together. Without it, nothing shared could survive a single generation. You learned it before you could read. You learned it in the way a room went cold when you said the wrong thing. You learned it in the smile your mother used with guests, and in what happened after the door closed. The second law does not negotiate. It has no counsel and no season. It does not care what is acceptable this year. It shows up in you as an absolute. Not as an argument you win, but as a place you cannot step past, even when you want to. Jung spent his life describing this second thing. He called the center it comes from the self, and he meant something much larger than your opinions or your preferences. The self is the whole of you, conscious and unconscious together, including everything you have never met. It has aims of its own. It does not consult your comfort before it acts. Most of the time, the two laws overlap enough that you never notice they are separate. You are honest, and honesty is also rewarded. You are loyal, and loyalty is also expected. Then, one day they split. The group requires one thing, and something older in you requires the opposite. That is the moment everything in your life is decided, and it usually lasts under a minute. Antigone lived inside that minute. So have you? More times than you can count. And here is what almost nobody realizes about that moment. The pain of it is not a sign that you have made an error. Her sister begged her not to do it. That detail matters more than the burial itself. Ismene was not a coward. She was reasonable, frightened, and correct about the consequences. Ismene said what every reasonable person says. We are only women. We are outnumbered. The dead cannot be helped. Living is not a betrayal. Every one of those sentences is true. That is what makes them so hard to answer. Antigone did not answer them. She simply said that she would go and do what had to be done, and that Ismene could choose otherwise without being hated for it. Then she walked out to the plain in daylight and covered her brother with dust and poured the offering. She did not sneak. She did not deny it when they came. She was sentenced to be sealed alive inside a chamber of stone, food beside her, air enough to last. A slow burial so that no one could say the city had killed her outright. Here is where most retellings go wrong. They make her a symbol of rebellion, a young woman shouting at power. That is not what the text shows. She is not exhilarated. She grieves openly on the way to the tomb. She names everything she is losing, out loud, without shame. She never married. She will not have children. She will not grow old in her own house. She counts each loss and mourns it. And she still does not change her mind. That combination is what makes her an archetype rather than a slogan. Full knowledge of the cost, full grief about the cost, and no movement at all on the decision. You know this state. You have grieved a friendship while refusing to say the thing that would have saved it. You have wept about a job while knowing you would not go back and sign your name to it. This is not stubbornness. Stubbornness has no grief in it, and the reason your life keeps arriving at this exact crossroads is older than you are. For nearly all of human history, exile was death, not a metaphor, not a period of sadness, an actual ending. Cast out of the village, you did not survive the winter, the animals, or the other tribes. Your nervous system was formed in that world, not this one. It learned one lesson above all others. Stay inside the circle. Whatever it costs, stay inside the circle. This is why disapproval feels the way it does in your body. The flush of heat, the dropped stomach, the night of replaying one sentence you said in a meeting. That reaction is not weakness or vanity. It is an ancient alarm doing exactly what it was shaped to do. It is telling you that your place near the fire is in question. Jung described the deep merging of the individual with the group, a state where a person cannot tell where the crowd ends and they begin. In that state, there is no separate person to speak. There is only the mood of the group, wearing many faces. Most people live inside that, merging their whole lives and call it having values. Their conscience and the opinion of their circle produce identical results, so the difference is never tested. Then the circle asks for something the deeper law forbids. And a very small number of people discover, with horror, that they cannot comply. Notice the word, cannot. Not will not should not. Something below the level of choice refuses to move the hand. Antigone stands there because a whole city has agreed to leave a body in the dirt, and she is unable to walk past it. You stand there because a room has agreed to a false version of events, and your mouth will not form the agreement. The tribe reads this as arrogance. From inside, it feels nothing like arrogance. It feels like being pinned. And the reason it feels that way reaches into the deepest layer of the psyche. Belonging and obedience begin as the same thing. For a small child, they genuinely are the same thing. A child cannot survive alone. So a child does the only intelligent thing available. She studies the adults and learns which parts of herself are welcome. The welcome parts get practiced until they become fluent. The unwelcome parts get put somewhere out of sight. Jung had a word for the face built out of the welcome parts. He called it the persona, borrowing the term from the mask an actor wore on stage. The persona is not a lie. It is a necessary interface between a private interior and a public world. Everyone needs one. A person without any mask is not authentic, only unbearable. The trouble starts when the mask stops being something you wear and becomes something you believe you are. Then every request from the group feels like a request from your own soul. Compliance stops feeling like compliance and starts feeling like virtue. This is the ordinary condition of most adults. It is comfortable. It is rewarded. It is also why so many people arrive at 50 with no idea what they actually think about anything that matters. Now imagine a girl in whom the mask never fully sealed. Something in her stayed outside it. A part that kept watching the adults, kept noticing the gap between what was said and what was done, and never learned to unnotice it. She was called precocious, then sensitive, then difficult. The words changed as she aged, and the meaning stayed the same. She was being told that her mask was fitting badly, and that this was her failure to correct. You were that girl. You may still be waiting for the day the mask finally seals and life becomes easy. It will not seal. Something in you keeps refusing the final stitch. And there is a reason for that refusal, which Jung considered one of the most serious discoveries of his life. Most people think conscience is one thing. It is at least two, and they are frequently at war. The first conscience is the voice of everyone who raised you. It is your family, your teachers, your faith, your profession, your culture, all speaking at once in what sounds like your own voice. This conscience is invaluable. It keeps ordinary life civil. It also has no independent authority whatsoever. Change the country, and it changes with you. It is why entire nations have committed atrocities while every participant felt morally correct. Their conscience was working perfectly. It was simply reporting the consensus of the people around them. Jung took this seriously enough to write about it directly. He distinguished between the moral rules a person absorbs and something far rarer. A verdict breaks in from a deeper place and speaks against those rules. The old writers called that second thing the voice of God. Jung was careful not to claim he knew its source. He only insisted it was real, that it did not come from the collective, and that no inherited rule could overrule it. It arrives with a particular quality, not as an idea you are considering, as a verdict that has already been reached somewhere below you and is now being delivered. You have felt this. Someone proposed something reasonable, and before you could think, you already knew you would not be part of it. The knowing came first. The reasons came later, and they were never as strong as the knowing. That is the mark of the second conscience. It does not argue its way to a conclusion. It hands you one. Antigone never wins the debate in the play. Her uncle out-argues her repeatedly, and she does not care. She is not there to reason. She is reporting a verdict from a court that was in session long before he issued his decree. And that court speaks most clearly at the exact moment it costs you the most. When honesty is free, everybody has it. You cannot know what you believe by watching yourself agree with people who already agree with you. Nothing is being tested. Nothing is at stake. The deeper law stays silent during those seasons, and you may go years without hearing it. Many people take that silence as proof it does not exist. Then the price appears. Someone offers a promotion in exchange for a small silence. A family asks you to pretend an old injury never happened. A group decides that one person will carry the blame for something everyone did. The instant a price is attached, the second conscience becomes audible. That is not a coincidence. Cost is the only instrument that can measure it. Notice how it speaks. It rarely uses sentences. It comes as dread in your chest on the drive to work. It comes as a dream where you are hiding something under floorboards. It comes as an inability to sleep after a day in which nothing visibly happened. It comes as physical revulsion at a signature you have not yet given. Jungian thinkers describe this as the ethical function of the unconscious. The deeper psyche is not morally blank. It registers betrayal of the whole person, and it protests through the body long before the mind will admit anything is wrong. Your symptoms were never random. They were verdicts arriving in the only language available. This is why the women who carry this pattern are so often unwell in the years when they are being most agreeable. The compliance looks successful from outside. Inside, something is being suffocated, and the body files the report. Antigone's uncle sleeps soundly for exactly one night. Then the seer arrives, the birds behave strangely, the altars will not take the offerings, and the whole natural order begins to object. That is not superstition. That is a picture of what happens inside a person who has silenced the deeper law. And you have almost certainly been living inside that picture without knowing what to call it. Stay with that for a moment before going further. Something in you has been keeping accounts this entire time. Not your reputation, not your comfort. Something older than both, which has never once agreed to trade. Every ache you have carried out of a room where you would not go along was that keeper doing its work. It was not punishing you for being difficult. It was refusing to lose you. There is a strange relief in seeing this plainly. The struggle stops looking like a personal defect. It starts looking like the shape of an actual conflict. Human beings have lived inside that conflict for as long as there have been villages and unwritten law. The exile you have known is real. So is the reason for it. And what happens next in this pattern is stranger and far more important than the exile itself. This pattern does not usually announce itself with a courtroom or a burial. It lives in ordinary weeks, in small rooms, in the sentence you did not say and the one you could not stop yourself from saying. You may never have defied a ruler. You have almost certainly defied a group and paid for it in the ordinary currency of being left slightly outside. What follows are the specific shapes this takes. Read them slowly. Most people who carry this have never seen it described from the inside. You will recognize some of these immediately. Others you may have spent years explaining away as tiredness or moodiness or a bad fit with a particular workplace. They are not separate problems. They are one structure showing itself in 4 different rooms. And they tend to appear together, in the same person, across an entire life. That is what makes it a pattern rather than a series of unfortunate events. None of this is a diagnosis of something broken. Nothing here needs to be corrected yet. For now, only notice. Notice where your breath changes as you listen. Notice which of these you would defend if someone else described them to you. Notice the ones you have hidden most carefully, even from the people who love you. Because the hiding is part of the pattern too. Women who carry this learn early that the honest account of their inner life makes other people uneasy, so they narrate a softened version. They say the job was not a good fit. They say the friendship drifted. They say the family is complicated. The truer version is rarely spoken aloud. It sounds like this. I could not do the thing they needed me to do, and I have never fully understood why not. You are about to understand why not. The first shape is the one that started everything. You see the thing that everyone has agreed not to see. Not because you are looking for it, because it will not stop being visible to you. A story is told at a gathering, and you notice the part that has been quietly removed. A leader explains a decision, and you hear the sentence that is doing all the actual work. Everyone else absorbs the surface and moves on. You cannot move on, and you resent yourself for it. This is not intelligence. Plenty of very clever people are perfectly able to not see. It is an unwillingness at a level deeper than choice. And this is the part that costs you. Seeing it is not the problem. Everyone occasionally sees. The problem is that you cannot arrange your face. Something in you refuses to perform the agreement. You go quiet. You ask a question that is technically polite and lands like a stone in still water. Afterwards, people describe you as intense. What they mean is that they felt seen while you were in the room, and they had not consented to that. You go home and replay it. You wonder why you cannot simply let a small untruth pass, the way everyone else seems to. And you already know the answer. It is not that you refuse to let it pass. It is that it does not pass. The image stays. The false sentence keeps repeating itself. You wake at 4 a.m. with it still there, waiting to be dealt with. Antigone did not go looking for her brother's body. She simply could not walk through a city that had agreed to ignore it. There is no version of her that shrugs and goes to dinner. There is no version of you that does either. And that inability follows you into every close relationship you have ever had. The second shape is the one that has cost you the most people. Look back at how your relationships end. Not the ones that faded, but the ones that broke. They break in the same place. Every time. There is a moment where you are asked to accept something that would require you to unknow what you know. to agree that it did not happen, to keep a version of the story that keeps everyone comfortable, and you cannot. So the relationship ends, and you are usually the one blamed for ending it. The strange part is that the issue is often small from the outside. A single conversation, one request to let something go. Others watching cannot understand the scale of your reaction. From their view, you burned a decade of friendship over one remark. From inside, it was not one remark. It was a line, and once you had been asked to cross it, the crossing was already the end. You do not leave loudly. That is worth naming. Most women with this pattern do not stage exits. You go still. You become polite in a way that everyone can feel, and then you are simply not there anymore. This is why people say you are cold. They never saw the grief. You did it alone, in a car, in a bathroom, in the 6 months afterward when you kept almost writing to them. Ismene runs after her sister at the end, desperate to share the punishment. Antigone will not let her. She refuses to let a person be destroyed for a decision they did not truly make. Even in her worst hour, she will not accept borrowed loyalty. You do the same thing, and you call it protecting people. Sometimes it is. And sometimes your body knows the truth before any of this reaches your mind. The third shape happens below language. Your body decides before you do, and it does not ask permission. You are about to agree to something. Your mouth is forming the word, and your chest tightens, your throat closes, your stomach drops. Later, you explain it as anxiety. It is not anxiety. Anxiety fears the unknown. This knows exactly what is happening and is trying to stop it. Watch for the specific version of this. It is not fear before a difficult thing. It is revulsion before a false thing. Fear feels like wanting to run. This feels like wanting to be clean. Women with this pattern often have long histories of unexplained illness in periods when they were being most accommodating, the exhausting job they kept for 3 years too long, the marriage they held together with constant small self-erasures, the migraines, the clenched jaw, the stomach that would not settle, the strange fatigue that no rest could touch. And then, remarkably often, the symptoms lift within weeks of the break before anything in the outer life has actually improved. That is not coincidence. That is a body that stopped being asked to carry a contradiction. The deeper psyche cannot write you a letter. It has only the instruments it has, and it uses them without subtlety once it has been ignored long enough. So it makes you sick when you are lying to yourself. It makes you tired when you are living someone else's life. You have spent years trying to fix these symptoms. You have almost never asked what they were reporting. They were reporting the same thing every time. Something you are agreeing to is not survivable for the whole of you. And there is one more shape, and it is the one that isolates you most. The fourth shape confuses everyone, including you. You are calm in the crisis. You are wrecked by the dinner party. When something real breaks open, you become steady. The diagnosis comes, and you are the one making the calls. The accident happens, and your hands do not shake until much later. People say afterwards that they do not know how you did it. Then, on an ordinary Saturday, you sit at a table with pleasant people making pleasant conversation, and you feel your life force draining out through the floor. You cannot explain this to anyone. It sounds like an insult to the people at the table. Here is what is actually happening. The crisis is honest. In a crisis, everything false is stripped away and only what is real remains. You are native to that country. You breathe better there than anywhere else. The pleasant table is not honest. It runs on 100 small agreements about what will not be mentioned. Everyone is maintaining a shared surface, and the maintenance is invisible to them and enormous to you. So you sit there doing the work of not seeing, which is the one labor you were never built to do. And you go home believing something is wrong with you, because normal people find dinner restful and disaster exhausting, and you are the reverse. Nothing is wrong with you. You are simply oriented toward the real, and small talk is a controlled environment for keeping the real out. This is why women with this pattern often have very few friends and extraordinary depth with the ones they have. You cannot do the wide, shallow water. You can only go straight down. And once you see how deeply all of this runs, one question becomes unavoidable. Where does it actually come from? When Antigone is finally brought before the ruler, she does not plead. She tells him that his order was not made by the powers that matter. She says the law she followed is not from today and not from yesterday. It lives always, and no one knows when it first appeared. That single answer is why the play has survived for 2,500 years. She is not claiming a better opinion. She is claiming that there exists an order older than any decree, which was not invented by anyone and cannot be repealed by anyone. Jung spent decades finding evidence for something close to that claim. He found that the same images and moral structures appear in people who could not possibly have learned them from one another. Dreams in Zurich echoed myths from cultures the dreamer had never heard of. A patient with no religious education produced symbols found in ancient texts kept in locked libraries. He concluded that beneath the personal layer of the mind lies a shared inheritance, not inherited memories, but inherited patterns. Predispositions of the human psyche, the same way the body has predispositions of form. He called them archetypes, and one of them concerns what is owed to the dead and to blood. It concerns a bond that no group can dissolve by voting on it. You feel this whenever a rule collides with something that feels bottomless. A policy says one thing. Everything under your ribs says another. The policy has words and signatures. The other thing has no words at all, and it is stronger. That is not sentiment. That is a deeper layer of your own nature making itself known against a surface arrangement. Most people never test which layer they are standing on because the two rarely conflict openly. You have tested it repeatedly without meaning to. And that testing has been shaping you into something specific. There is a mistake almost everyone makes here, and it ruins the whole understanding. People hear about an inner authority and assume it means their preferences. My truth. What feels right to me. What I want. That is not what Jung meant, and it is nearly the opposite. Your preferences belong to the ego, the small daylight part of you that manages your life and thinks it is the whole house. The ego wants comfort, status, safety, and to be seen as good. The self is not that. The self is the whole psyche, the entire territory, including everything you have never explored and everything you would rather not meet. It is not your best opinion. It is the organizing center of a person, and it frequently wants things the ego finds appalling. The self will lead you out of a comfortable marriage. It will end a career you spent 20 years building. It will hand you a truth that will cost you your standing in your own family. It is not interested in your happiness in any way you would recognize. It is interested in your wholeness, which is a different and much harsher project. This is why obedience to it does not feel like self-expression. It feels like being conscripted. Women who carry this pattern report the same thing in almost identical language. They say they did not decide. They say something decided in them. They say it was not brave, because bravery implies an option was available and they could not find one. Antigone says this plainly. She tells her sister that she will do what must be done and then lie down beside her brother, and that this is holy work. She is not choosing a value from a list. She is being moved by something that has already claimed her. And the difference between that and simple rebellion is the most important distinction in this entire pattern. Individuation is the word Jung used for becoming the person you actually are. It is one of the most misunderstood ideas in psychology. People hear it as a private mission of self-realization, where you cut away everyone who does not accept you and finally live for yourself. That is not individuation. That is the ego with a new vocabulary. Individuation does not mean leaving the group. It means no longer being identical with the group. A person who is identical with the group has no separate position from which anything can be seen. Their conscience produces the same output as the room, always, and they experience this as harmony. A person who has individuated still lives among people. They still have obligations, warmth, and ordinary loyalties. The difference is that there is now a second point of reference. When the group and the deeper law agree, they act with the group and mean it. When the two split, they know which one they answer to. That is the entire achievement. It sounds small. It is the work of a lifetime, and most people never begin it. And it is worth saying clearly, this does not make you superior to anyone. It makes you more responsible, which is a heavier arrangement entirely. The person who is merged with the group can always say they were following instructions. You have lost that shelter permanently. Every choice is now yours, signed with your name, with nobody standing behind you. This is why individuation is described in the old texts as a burden rather than a prize. Antigone is not free. She is bound to something she did not choose, and it takes her life. But she is unmistakably herself, from the first line to the last, which the entire chorus of Thebes cannot manage for a single scene. The question, then, is how you tell the real thing from its counterfeit. Not every refusal comes from the center. This is where the pattern turns dangerous. There is a defiance that comes from the wound, and it looks almost identical from outside. The wounded refusal is a reaction. Something in your history taught you that being controlled is unbearable, so you refuse first, on principle, before the situation has even been examined. It has heat in it. It wants the other person to feel something. It gets sharper when it is challenged, and it grows in the presence of an audience. Most importantly, it is not about the matter at hand. It is about an old injury that keeps finding new occasions. Jung would locate this in a complex. A complex is a cluster of feeling around an old wound. When it is touched, it takes over the personality and speaks with your whole voice. You will know it by its aftertaste. Wounded defiance leaves you agitated, replaying the exchange, composing better lines for hours afterward. The refusal that comes from the center feels entirely different. It is cold in the best sense, not cruel, but quiet. There is no rush of righteousness. There is often no satisfaction at all. It does not want the other person to suffer. It frequently wishes there were any other way, and it will look for one until the last possible moment. And afterward, it leaves grief rather than agitation. You are not composing better lines. You are simply sad and settled and unable to imagine having done otherwise. Both refusals can lead to the same outcome in the world. Only one of them makes you more whole. Women with this pattern usually carry both, tangled together, and cannot tell which is speaking. That confusion is what keeps you second-guessing yourself at 3 a.m. There is a way to sort them, and it is embarrassingly simple. One question separates the two refusals. Would you still do it if no one ever knew? Not if no one saw. If no one ever knew. Not your friends, not your family, not the person you would have told about it years later. Rebellion cannot survive that question. Rebellion needs a witness because its real purpose is to be registered by someone. Take away every possible observer and the fire goes out. The deeper refusal does not change at all. It is not addressed to anyone. It is not a message. Antigone buried her brother in daylight, which everyone reads as a statement. Look more closely at the play. She had already buried him once, secretly, in a dust storm when no one could see. The guards cleaned it away and she came back and did it again. The first burial was not a demonstration. Nobody was meant to know. She did it because it needed doing, and there was no one else who would. That is the mark you are looking for in your own life. The things you refused when there was no audience. The lines you held in private, at your own expense, with no story to tell afterward. Look at those, and you will find the ones that came from the center. Now look at the other set. The arguments you told well. The stands that always ended with you being described as the person who finally said it. Some of those were real too, but some of them were the wound seeking a stage, and you already know which is which. This is not a reason for shame. Everyone carries both. The point is to know which voice is speaking before you pay a price you cannot undo. And there is one more trap in this pattern, and it is subtle enough to ruin a life. There is a way to ruin this entire gift, and it is common enough that Jung warned about it constantly. You can identify with the pattern instead of serving it. An archetype is enormous. It carries the weight of every person who ever lived it. When it moves through you, you feel that weight, and it can be mistaken for personal size. Then something shifts. You stop being a woman who is moved to do a hard thing. You start being the one who always stands alone. That is the moment it turns from a calling into a costume. You will know the costume by its appetite. It needs conflict. It goes looking for the next stand, because without a stand, there is no identity left. It cannot rest inside ordinary peace. A quiet month feels like a threat. It also cannot bend on anything, including things that do not matter. Real conviction is specific and narrow. Inflation is total and treats every disagreement as the same battle. And it makes you brittle. The woman who has become the story cannot ever be wrong, because being wrong would end her. This is the martyr who arranges her own crucifixions. She is not obeying the deeper law. She She is feeding on the picture of herself obeying it. Jung was blunt about the cost. A person inflated by an archetype loses the ordinary human scale that keeps them sane, and eventually the psyche corrects it violently. The protection is unglamorous. Stay small. Keep your hands in ordinary work. Keep people around you who can tell you plainly that you are being ridiculous. Serve the thing when it actually comes. And on all the days it does not come, let yourself be an unremarkable person doing unremarkable things. The real ones almost never look like Antigone. They look like your aunt who once quietly refused to sign something and never mentioned it again. And to stay that ordinary, you will need to make peace with the part of you that wanted to comply. Ismene has been treated badly by history. She deserves better, and so does the part of you she represents. She is the sister who said no. She wanted to live. She was frightened, and she said so, which took its own kind of honesty. Most readers dismiss her as the weak one. That reading tells you more about the reader than the play. Inside you, there is an Ismene. She is the part that wants the job, the invitation, the smooth holiday with the family. She is the part that says, just this once, let it go. You have spent years despising her. You call her cowardice. You call her the weakness that almost made you sell yourself. Every time you have gone along with something, you have punished her afterward. Here is what you have missed. She is the reason you are alive. Someone in you has been keeping you fed, employed, and inside human society while the other part refuses everything. That someone is her. A psyche that only had Antigone would be dead by 30. Ismene pays the rent. She smiles at the difficult relative. She lets 1,000 small things pass so that you have the strength to not let the one large thing pass. Jung's whole method rests on this. You do not achieve wholeness by choosing your favorite part and killing the rest. You achieve it by holding the opposites together until something new appears between them. The woman who has only defiance is as unfree as the woman who has only compliance. Both are being run by a single voice. Freedom is having both voices in the room and being the one who decides. So stop hunting your own softness. It is not the enemy of your integrity. It is the ground your integrity stands on. And once you have made peace with her, you can finally look at the harder figure in this story. Every woman with this pattern also carries the ruler. Creon is not a villain in the simple sense. That is what makes him useful. He had just watched his city nearly destroyed by two brothers fighting over a throne. Bodies in the streets, order barely restored, and he decided that nothing like it would ever happen again. His decree was not cruelty for its own sake. It was terror dressed as principle. That is exactly what the inner ruler is in you. It is the part that saw something go badly wrong once and built a rule to make sure it never happens again. It speaks in your head with a flat voice. Do not make trouble. Do not be the one who ruins it. Do not put yourself outside the circle again. It sounds like wisdom. It is fear that has learned to sound like wisdom. And notice what happens in the play. Creon does not lose because Antigone defeats him in argument. He loses because he cannot bend, and everything he loves dies in his hands. His son, his wife, his standing. All of it because a frightened man mistook rigidity for strength. There is a version of you that could become him. It is not far away. It is the version that decided, after being hurt, that no one gets close again, and called that a value. The work here is not to overthrow the inner ruler. It is to find out what he is protecting. Underneath every rigid rule in you, there is a specific memory. A moment when speaking cost you badly. A season when belonging was taken away and you swore never again. Meet that memory, and the rule loses its grip. Ignore it, and it will run your life while wearing the face of your integrity. And once you have seen all of this clearly, something in the whole picture turns over. They did not kill her outright. That detail is the whole turning point. They sealed her in a chamber of stone with enough food and enough air. That way, the city could tell itself it had not spilled her blood. It was meant to be the worst thing that could happen to a person. Removed from every eye, erased from the conversation, left in a place where nothing she said could reach anyone. And it is exactly here that the story stops being about punishment, because a sealed chamber is also a vessel. It is a place where nothing enters and nothing escapes, where whatever is inside must undergo whatever it is going to undergo. The old alchemists Jung studied were obsessed with such vessels. They insisted the transformation could not occur in an open dish. The material had to be closed in, heated and left with no exit. Nothing changes in the open air. It only disperses. You have been in that chamber, not made of stone. It was the year after you were pushed out of the group and no one called. It was the season when your name was being discussed in rooms you were no longer invited into. It was the months of doing your work alone, unwitnessed, with no evidence that you had been right about anything. You experienced it as being buried, and in a real sense you were. But notice what happened to you in there. Something in you went very quiet and very clear. The noise of managing everyone's impressions stopped because there was no one left to manage. And in that silence, you heard something you had not been able to hear in 20 years of belonging. That is the paradox at the center of this whole pattern. The place where they put you to silence you is the only place where you could finally hear. Understand what approval actually does. It is not merely pleasant. It is a mirror. From the time you were small, you learned who you were by watching faces. Their reactions told you what you were, and you assembled a person out of that information. While the mirror is working, you cannot tell which parts of you are yours and which parts are reflections. Then the mirror is taken away. Exile does something specific and irreplaceable. It removes every face you were using to locate yourself. For a while, this feels like dying, and there is no way to describe it that makes it sound survivable. You lose the sense of your own outline. You do not know if you are right about anything. And then, some weeks or months in, a strange thing happens. A quieter voice becomes audible, one that had been drowned out your entire life by the noise of being watched. It says small, unglamorous, unmistakable things. This work matters, and that one never did. This person was never your friend. You have been afraid of the wrong thing for 15 years. You did not reason your way to any of it. It was simply there once the noise stopped. This is why the deepest suffering and the clearest sight arrive together. Not because pain is good. Pain is not good. But the specific pain of being cast out removes the specific obstacle that keeps most people from ever hearing themselves. The women who carry the strongest light are not stronger by nature. They were stripped of the mirror early and had to find another source of illumination or perish. They found it. That is all. And the finding is not romantic. It is simply what was left. And what they find in that dark is almost never what they expected to find. Now take the story inward, the way Jung would. Every figure in a myth is also a part of a single psyche. The ruler, the sister, the seer, the crowd, and the body left outside the walls. Ask what that body is in you. Somewhere in your history, a group made a decision about a part of you. It ruled that this part was unacceptable and that it would not be honored, named, or given a place. Perhaps it was your anger. Perhaps your ambition in a family where women were not to want. Perhaps your desire, your grief, your talent, or your need. The verdict was rarely spoken aloud. It arrived in the way a room changed when that part of you appeared. So you left it outside the walls. You agreed with the decree. You walked past it for years and did not look. Jung called this the shadow, not the evil in you, the disowned in you, which is a different and far more common thing. Here is what the play understands that most self-improvement never touches. The dead do not stop mattering because a decree says they do not. The unburied part keeps calling. In your dreams, in your sudden rages, in the person you inexplicably cannot stand, in the exhaustion that has no medical cause. And the act that heals is not destroying it and not celebrating it. It is burial. It is the honoring of something so that it can finally rest inside you as yours. That means naming it, saying out loud or in writing, this too is mine. My hunger, my fury, my want, mine, and not shameful and not for display. Antigone risked everything to give one body its rights. The inward version of that act is the most consequential work you will ever do. And when it is done, something in your bearing changes and other people see it before you do. People will tell you that you have become hard. They are describing something real and naming it wrongly. Here is what actually happened to you. You paid for something once. Not in theory, in currency you could not get back. A friendship, a position, a family's warmth. And afterwards you discovered that you were still alive. That discovery cannot be given to anyone. It cannot be taught, borrowed, or read. It only arrives on the far side of an actual loss you actually survived. Once you have it, a specific kind of leverage over you stops working. The threat of exclusion loses its authority. The worst thing already occurred, and you are still here, drinking tea on an ordinary Tuesday. That is not hardness. Hardness is brittle. Hardness has to defend itself constantly. What you have is something else. It is the particular steadiness of a person who has already paid and therefore cannot be bought. This is what people feel when they say a woman has weight. It is not confidence. Confidence is loud and needs results to sustain it. It is that she is not for sale, and everyone in the room can sense it without knowing what they are sensing. And notice the strange effect it has. People bring her their worst news. They tell her things they have told no one, because she does not flinch, and she does not require them to be presentable in order to remain in her regard. That is the light, not brightness, not charisma. The steady, unpurchasable quality of someone who has met the cost and stayed. Jung would say this is what wholeness looks like from outside. Not perfection, not serenity, just a person who is not divided against herself, standing in a world where almost everyone is. The question now is no longer where the light comes from. The question is what you actually do with it. Understanding this pattern will not change your life. That has to be said plainly. You can hold every idea here perfectly and still spend the next decade in the same rooms, saying the same nothing, paying the same private cost. What follows is not advice about being braver. Bravery is not the missing ingredient, and telling a woman with this pattern to be braver is almost insulting. You are not short on courage. You are short on discernment, and on the small daily practices that keep the deeper voice from being drowned out until the crisis arrives. The aim is not to make you defy more. Defiance is not the goal, and a life organized around defiance is a life run by the same tribe you think you left. The aim is to know which law is speaking in ordinary time before the stakes are high. Because the moment of collision arrives fast, and it does not wait for you to prepare. It arrives in a meeting, at a table, in a single sentence from someone you love. If you have not done the work beforehand, you will do what you have always done. You will either freeze and comply and be sick for a week, or you will detonate and lose something you did not intend to lose. The practices that follow are quiet. None of them require a confrontation. None of them will be visible to anyone. They are also difficult in the way that anything real is difficult. Not because the steps are complex, but because they ask for honesty in the exact places you have been avoiding. This is not easy. It is entirely possible. And the first one begins with a distinction you have never been taught to make, though you have been living inside it your entire life. Take a page and draw a line down the middle. On the left, write everything you have done in the last year that you would be ashamed of if a particular group found out. Your colleagues, your family, the people whose opinion still moves you. On the right, write everything you have done that you are ashamed of when you were completely alone. Nobody watching, nobody informed, nothing at stake but you. Do this slowly. It takes longer than you expect, and the second column resists being written. Now look at the two lists, because they are reports from two different courts. The left column is the voice of the group living inside you. Almost everything there is about appearance, status, and the fear of being seen badly. The right column is the other conscience. It is usually shorter. It is almost always about a moment when you knew something and went along anyway. Most people never see these separately, so the two get experienced as one undifferentiated guilt. That is why so many women feel guilty constantly and cannot tell what about. Once the columns are separate, something becomes possible. You can begin to let the left column lose some of its authority. Not all of it. Some of it is genuine care about the people you live among, and that deserves respect. But a good portion of it is the ancient alarm, still shouting about the winter and the wolves in a life where neither is coming. And the right column becomes the thing you actually attend to. That is your compass, and it has been buried under the noise of the other for decades. Do this once a month. Nothing else here works until you can hear the difference between the two voices. And there is a moment where that difference becomes physically detectable if you know when to look for it. The second practice takes place in a space of about half a second, and it will change more than any confrontation ever could. There is a gap between the moment a request lands and the moment you answer it. In that gap, your body has already voted. It always votes first. You have simply never been taught to read the ballot. So begin catching that gap, not to change your answer, only to notice. Someone asks you for something. Before you speak, take one breath and check 3 places: the chest, the throat, and the stomach. You are looking for one specific sensation, a downward drop, a tightening, a sense of something closing. That is the refusal. It arrives before any reasoning, and it is remarkably accurate. And this next part is what makes the practice safe. You do not have to act on it. You are allowed to notice the drop and still say yes. Most of the time you should, because most requests are small and going along is the fabric of ordinary life. The practice is not obedience to every internal signal. That would be another kind of tyranny. The practice is building a reliable record. For 6 weeks, note the moments the drop appeared and what you did. At the end of 6 weeks, read it. You will find a pattern that will genuinely surprise you. You will find that the drop is not random and not neurotic and not about difficulty. It appears at a specific kind of request and always the same kind. That is your line. It has been in the same place your entire life, and you have never once seen it written down. Once you can see it clearly, you stop being ambushed by it. And then you can begin to act on it deliberately at a size you can survive. The third practice corrects the mistake that has cost you most of your life. Women with this pattern tend to have only 2 settings: total compliance, held for years, then a single enormous act that costs everything. You swallow and swallow and swallow. Then one day you say the whole truth at full volume and lose the job, the friendship, the family peace. Then, exhausted by the wreckage, you go back to swallowing, because the only alternative you know is catastrophic. The way out is to make the truth small enough to be affordable. Choose one sentence a week that costs you something minor, not the great confrontation. A sentence that costs you an ounce of comfort and no more. I do not actually agree with that. I would rather not. That is not how I remember it. I am not available on Saturday. Say it without softening it into unrecognizability. Say it without the long apology on either side. Then watch what happens. Almost always, nothing happens. The room does not turn. The person does not leave. Your ancient alarm predicted exile, and instead someone said fine and passed the salt. Each of these is a small burial. Each is an act of honoring the thing in you that keeps being left outside the walls. And they accumulate in a way the large acts never do. A woman who has told the small truth 200 times is a different creature. She is not the woman who told the enormous truth once and paid everything. She is not braver. She is practiced. When the real collision comes, and it will come, her hands are steady because they have done this motion before. This is how the pattern stops running your life and starts serving it. And there is one more figure you must sit down with, and it is the one you have been avoiding. The fourth practice is the one Jung considered the heart of the whole method. He called it active imagination. It is not visualization, and it is not pretending. It is a deliberate conversation with a part of yourself, conducted in writing, where you let the other side speak without correcting it. Sit down. Bring to mind the voice that tells you not to make trouble. The flat one. The one that says, do not be the difficult one again. Give it a name. Give it a form. Most women find it takes the shape of a specific person from their history, or a composite of several. Then ask it one question and write down the answer without editing. What are you afraid will happen to me? Do not answer for it. Wait and write what comes, even if it sounds childish or strange. You will get something like this. If you speak, they will drop you. If they drop you, you will be alone. If you are alone, you will not survive it. Look at that answer. It is not the reasoning of a tyrant. It is the reasoning of something terrified, doing a job nobody thanked it for. Now write back, not as an argument and not as a lecture. Tell it what actually happened the last time you were dropped. Tell it that you were alone and that it was severe and that you survived it. Tell it the date. Give it evidence. That is the whole practice. The inner ruler does not need to be overthrown. It needs new information because it has been operating on a report from your childhood ever since. Creon only breaks when it is too late because nobody ever asks him what he is protecting. Your version can be asked in time, and when it finally softens, you will feel something you have not felt in years. A little less pressure in the chest when you are about to speak. And there is one last thing to practice, and it is the one that keeps this from turning you cruel. The last practice is the one almost nobody does, and its absence is what turns integrity into contempt. When you hold a line and it costs you a person, you must grieve it. Fully. Out loud if you can, on paper if you cannot. Not afterwards, when it has calcified. As close to the event as you can manage. Here's why this matters more than it sounds. Ungrieved loss does not disappear. It converts. It becomes hardness. It becomes the quiet superiority of a woman who has decided everyone else is a coward. It becomes a wall built out of unshed tears, and it will cost you every remaining relationship you have. Antigone grieves openly. This is the detail almost every retelling removes. On the way to the chamber, she says what she is losing. No wedding, no children, no old age in her own house. She names each one and mourns it in front of everyone. She does not perform strength. She does not claim she never wanted those things. She wanted them enormously, and she is losing them, and she says so. Then she goes anyway. That combination is the entire secret. Full grief and no reversal. It is what keeps conviction human instead of letting it curdle. So build the practice in. After every hard line you hold, sit down and write what it cost. The specific person. The specific warmth you will not have again. Let yourself want the easier life. Let yourself say plainly that you wish you were someone for whom this was simple. You are not asking to change the decision. You are refusing to let the decision harden you. And then, slowly, something in you settles that has been unsettled since childhood. That night you lay awake replaying one sentence you said in a room. You finally understand what that sleeplessness was. It was not weakness. It was two laws meeting in a body that had nowhere to put the collision. There is one more thing about Antigone that almost everyone misses, and it changes how you should hold all of this. She was never trying to prove anything. She did not want a movement. She did not want the city to see her differently. She never once tried to persuade the crowd, and she did not ask them to follow her. She had a brother lying outside the walls, and there was something owed to him, and she went and did it. That is the whole of it. Everything grand that has been written about her since was written by other people. Hold that carefully, because your version of this pattern will constantly try to become a cause. You will be tempted to make your refusals into an identity and to gather people who admire you for them. There is real sweetness in that, and it is the beginning of the end of the thing itself. The women who carry this well are strangely uninteresting to talk to about it. They will not tell you the story. They usually think they did nothing remarkable. Ask one of them why she left the position that everyone wanted, and she will look uncomfortable and say she just could not stay. That discomfort is the mark of the real thing. It has no speech prepared because it was never addressed to an audience. Your integrity does not need to be understood. That is worth reading twice. It does not need anyone to agree, to validate it, or to acknowledge later that you were right. Most of the time, no one will. You will hold a line and lose something, and the world will simply continue as though nothing occurred. That has to be survivable, or none of this works. And yet, more often than you know, something did occur in a place you will never see. In the play, the citizens of Thebes agree with Antigone almost entirely. They say so, but only to each other, and quietly, and never where the ruler can hear. Her uncle's own son tells him plainly. The city is on her side. They are simply too afraid of you to say it out loud. Read that again, because it is one of the truest lines ever written about groups of people. The room usually knows. The room almost always knows. That colleague who avoided your eyes during the meeting has thought about that meeting more than you realize. The relative who said nothing at the table went home and could not sleep. Some of them will tell you years later. A message out of nowhere. A conversation at a funeral. I never said anything at the time, and I have thought about it ever since. Most of them will never tell you at all, and you will die believing you were alone in that room. You were not alone. You were simply the only one who could not hold the silence. And this is the part that matters. Something happened to the people who watched you. A person who witnesses one act of unpurchased honesty carries it. They do not always act on it, but it sits in them as evidence that the thing is possible. Children especially. The girl who saw her aunt refuse to sign something received an inheritance. So did the girl whose mother said plainly that this was not true. No one named it at the time. She learned that the deeper law exists and that a woman can obey it. You have almost certainly given that to someone without knowing. So the isolation you have felt has never been the whole picture. It has only ever been the part you could see from where you were standing. Go back to the room from the beginning. Everyone agreed on something that was not true. Heads nodded. The coffee kept moving. You know now what happened in you during that moment, and it was not a failure of social skill. Two orders of law met inside one body. One was made by the people in that room, that season, for reasons they mostly did not examine. The other was not made by anyone. You were not being difficult. You were being loyal, in the exact place where loyalty is invisible and looks like trouble. Nothing about that room will change. There will be another one next month. There is always another room. What changes is what you know while you are sitting in it. You will feel the drop in your chest, and now you will recognize the signal instead of calling it anxiety. You will notice which shame is speaking, the one that fears the group or the one that answers to you when you are alone. Sometimes you will let it pass, and that will be the right decision, and you will not punish yourself for a week afterward. And sometimes you will say the sentence, not loudly. Not as a stand, just a plain sentence at the size you can afford, and then you will go home and grieve whatever it cost. That is what this looks like in an actual life. It is not a play. There is no chorus, no seer, no chamber of stone. There is just a woman at a table who knows which law she answers to, and who has stopped requiring anyone else to understand. That woman has been forming in you for a very long time, through every cost you thought was wasted. And what she carries has a name that you have heard your whole life without recognizing what it meant. The light people see in women who have suffered most is not a reward for suffering. Nothing in this deserves that sentence. Suffering by itself produces nothing but damage. Most of it is simply loss, and it should be named as loss. What produces the light is what a very small number of people do inside the suffering. They refuse to trade the thing that cannot be traded. Not out of pride, out of an inability that they did not choose and could not overcome. And in the chamber where they were sealed, with the mirror of everyone's approval taken away, they hear something. Then they spend the rest of their lives standing on it. That is why she seems to know things. She is not wiser by nature. She simply has an inner reference point that most people never developed, because most people were never forced to. She listens differently because she is not scanning your face for permission. She stays present with your worst news because she is not afraid of what unbearable things do to a person. She has met them, and she cannot be bought with acceptance, which is the only currency most rooms have. You have been that woman for years without granting yourself the word. Every time you paid, you thought you were failing at belonging. You were not failing. You were becoming something belonging cannot make. The cost was real, and it will go on being real. Nothing here erases a single loss. But the thing you called your defect was never a defect. The inability to go along, the trouble you cause, the sentence you cannot swallow. It is the oldest law in you, still working, in a body that has never been able to betray it. And now you know what it is. The Chamber of Stone is not the end of that story. It is only where the story becomes unmistakable. Everything Antigone lost was real, and none of it came back. The play does not soften that, and neither should anyone retelling it. What survives is smaller and stranger than victory. A woman held one thing that could not be traded, and 25 centuries later, people are still trying to explain her. They are still trying because she names something that will not go away. There is an order in the human soul that no vote can repeal. It speaks loudest in the people who paid the most to hear it. That order has been speaking in you for a long time. In rooms where you went quiet. In nights you could not sleep. In the moment your body refused before your mouth could agree. It was never noise. It was never a defect. It was the deepest part of you refusing to lose you. You were never difficult. You were loyal to a law they had all agreed to forget.